Revealed, the incredible moment a single dad CEO discovered an unexpected bond with a waitress. Jake submerged himself in the energy of a bustling diner, a small sanctuary amidst the chaos of Chicago. After another grueling day filled with endless board meetings and high-stakes decisions, he needed this more than ever. He needed the comfort of sizzling patties, the hum of conversations, and the robust scent of coffee that revived him like a slap in the face. But as he sat down, he couldn't escape the gnawing feeling in his gut, the relentless ache of guilt for not being there for Lily. The evening buzzed with life, but inside, Jake wrestled with the conflict tearing him apart. His 10-year-old daughter was at home, growing up without him, and it gripped his heart with an unease he couldn't shake. The success of his tech startup loomed like a heavyweight in his chest, but at what cost? How many more nights could he sacrifice sleep for profit? He set his coffee cup down harshly, rattling it against the table, drawing a curious glance from a waitress named Maria. She had fiery determination in her gaze, a spark he recognized. When she approached him and inquired about his order, a deep conversation unfolded, effortlessly dragging him into her world. Their talk meandered through childhood dreams, responsibilities, and struggles. Jake found himself oddly at ease, being drawn into her resilient story as she balanced college with supporting her family. The connection felt too real, a reminder of everything he could lose. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As they swapped stories over diner specials, Jake felt the weight of his corporate triumphs and failures blending into the shared weight they both carried, his looming corporate ambition against her vibrant art dreams being overshadowed by financial woes. Anxiety twisted inside him. Underneath his tailored suit lay a desperate man, questioning everything. Was climbing the corporate ladder worth sacrificing his relationship with Lily? The thought squeezed his chest like a vice. But it was Maria's laughter that struck a chord he hadn't anticipated. As they talked, he felt her laughter flicker warmth through the cold darkness that had seeped into his life. Yet, with every hearty laugh, the looming reality of her struggles threatened to cloud the moment an eviction notice could come any day for her family. His mind raced as Jake gripped the edge of his seat, the chaos around them fading into a blur. Should he risk his professional standing to help her? This wasn't just about a friendship, it was about affecting lives, altering trajectories. The thought twisted in his mind. Would his corporate colleagues even understand? Would they scorn him for extending his hand to someone deemed beneath them? As he glanced at Maria, her features momentarily softening in the dim light, Jake felt an urgency building, a need to act, but the fear of judgment weighed heavily. The limits of his own ambition now stood in stark contrast against the raw vulnerability in her eyes. Yet, the question remained, gnawing at him like a predatory beast. What would he sacrifice to truly connect with those who mattered? He was at a crossroads, the ground beneath him shifting. Deep down, he knew he was being pulled into a storm he couldn't ignore. And just like that, everything began to unravel. Jake sat in tense silence after their conversation, the clamor of the diner fading to a distant echo. Thoughts collided within him, a tempest threatening to engulf the remnants of his carefully constructed life. Beneath the shine of his burgeoning career, a crucial truth loomed large: success was a hollow victory if it cost him his daughter's affection. He observed Maria as she bustled through the diner, her laughter still reverberating in his mind. With every smile exchanged, he felt the tightening grip of guilt release just a fraction, revealing the warmth of connection that had long eluded him. For the first time in months, he was not just a CEO, he was a human, entangled in the everyday struggles of someone else. It astonished him how quickly their lives became intertwined. Could he genuinely prioritize another's welfare amid corporate maneuvers centered on metrics and margins? Jake's heart raced, torn between the fundamental values that had guided him: integrity, accountability, and a growing desire to redefine success, to be more than just a number on a balance sheet. The thought of Maria's precarious situation churned inside him. Faced with the prospect of potential homelessness, she deserved better than what he could offer if he allowed fear to suffocate the instinct to act. Each sip from his coffee cup fortified his resolve, even as a multitude of what-ifs clamored for his attention. As he swiped his phone to review his schedule, it became glaringly clear. He was drowning in obligations, with no time for real connections, for acts of kindness. His mind raced through possibilities. What if he could help her without sacrificing his reputation? Could he propose a collaboration between her artistic talents and his company's community outreach program? But the corporate world was not kind. It thrived on competition, often dismissing empathy as a weakness. Jake's core values clashed against his ambition yet again. He wondered if taking this step might cost him not only respect among his peers but could also fortify his relationship with Lily through action and example. If he became someone who stood for more than just profits, could he teach her the importance of compassion? His thoughts drifted back to Lily, the innocence in her big brown eyes, the pride she would feel if she knew her father had reached out to help someone in need. The knowledge struck him like lightning. Instead of being an absentee father defined by work, he could model a life fueled by purpose and connection. Swallowing hard, he made a decision. He would approach Maria tomorrow, speak to her about the outreach program, and assess how they could turn her artistic aspirations into a pathway for assistance. This was not merely about helping a waitress, it was about enriching both their lives and in turn, his daughter's too. As the evening drew to a close, the diner's bright neon sign illuminated his path ahead. For the first time, anticipation coursed through him, a new chapter waiting to be written. However, a gnawing tension remained. What would happen if his colleagues saw him as he sat down with her? Could he transform their perceptions of success? The next steps loomed daunting, but hesitation had no place in this newfound mission. As he prepared to leave, Jake's heart raced with hope flickering alongside uncertainty. He was ready to step into this unfolding narrative, unaware that the impact would stretch far beyond the diner. But before he could fully immerse himself in this purpose, a message pinged on his phone, a notification that held the power to change everything. Would he dare to open it? Jake's fingers hovered above the screen, the notification beckoning him with an urgency that felt discordant with his newfound resolve. His heart thumped in a steady rhythm of conflict, threading hope with anxiety. Could whatever lay behind this digital door redefine not only his current mission but his sense of self? With a deep breath, he opened the message. It was from one of his colleagues, an innocuous reminder about a crucial board meeting. But within its lines was the unasked accusation of neglect. The company was preparing for new initiatives that required full participation and focus from every leader, including himself. The realization slammed into him with the weight of obligation, a reminder that every minute of his time was already monopolized. The clock ticked menacingly in the background. He had less than 24 hours before he would be scrutinized for his actions or lack thereof. A flash of anger ignited inside him. How could they prioritize numbers over human connections? This wasn't just a battle between his personal desires and professional duties. It was a confrontation with the very fabric of his identity. In the reflection of a nearby window, he caught a glimpse of himself. What had he become? A suit-wearing puppet of the corporate machine. Was that the legacy he wanted to leave for Lily? Fists clenched, he wrestled with the urgency to find a way to merge his aspirations. If he was to make a genuine impact, he couldn't afford to keep himself confined to the status quo. Perhaps participation in the meeting could be an opportunity, after all, a platform to advocate for the outreach program, showcasing that empathy and ethics could coexist with profitability. The thought sent a jolt through him. Presenting Maria's story might even inspire others. But that path was fraught with risk. He could easily be mocked or dismissed by peers who saw vulnerability as foolishness. Jake recalled the rising tensions in boardrooms where decisions favored profits over people, fearing the derision that might follow his intentions. Yet another possibility emerged. What if he could share his decision to advocate for Maria and unfold the values he hoped to instill in Lily? It could serve as a bridge between his professional obligations and private convictions. But what awaited him when he revealed this to a room full of skeptics? Compelled by the urgency of his thoughts, Jake grabbed his notebook, scribbling possible scenarios, how to introduce Maria's passion while highlighting the potential that reinforced the company's brand. His mind whirred with strategies to frame the outreach as a mutually beneficial partnership. The incentive of a marketing angle began to bloom, giving roots to the fragile sentiment of compassion he was nurturing within. Could he really reframe the narrative? Would this be his moment of redemption? He envisioned Maria's artwork lending fresh life to their stale corporate image. The feeling of empowerment became electric, but it also coiled with an undercurrent of fear. If he spoke up and failed, what would that mean not only for him but for Maria, whom he was pursuing to help? Would he risk her hopes and dreams for the sake of a gamble? His internal struggle became palpable as he imagined walking into the boardroom with a boldness he had previously reserved for securing deals or closing substantial contracts. A simple waitress, one who had become a symbol of empathy in a jaded industry, might be the catalyst for change he needed. As dusk settled outside the diner, Jake felt a surge of renewed purpose, a burgeoning conviction that this was his chance to reclaim his integrity. But before he could reconcile his desires with reality, another ping from his phone drew his eyes. The next message was unexpected, a name from the past, one that could unravel everything he had just begun to stitch together. Would it push him further into the demanding world he was trying to escape, or could it provide clarity in his quest for a more authentic life? He hesitated, heart racing again, every second feeling like a precipice. What lay beyond that message had the power to redefine his future entirely. Would he dare to respond, or would he allow it to shadow the path he hoped to carve? Jake stared at the screen, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The name from the past shimmered like a mirage, both familiar and frightening. He hadn't seen or heard from Sarah in over a decade. Memories flickered, moments shared, and unspoken regrets filling the gaps. She had always pushed him to embrace his real self, away from the confines of corporate expectation. Would it help him now, or would it drag him back into the orbit he had been fighting to escape? With a quick flick of his thumb, he opened the message. It was brief but laced with urgency. "Jake, we need to talk. It's important." His instincts screamed to erase it, to shake off the remnants of a life he thought he'd moved beyond. Yet, the yearning to understand what lay behind those words was intoxicating. Could a conversation with Sarah illuminate the path he was seeking? He took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision. Responding might lead to an exploration of his past, but it also posed the risk of rediscovering the insecurities he had buried. But wasn't that what he needed? Genuine introspection to gain clarity amid the marionette strings the corporate world had tied around him? He began typing, but hesitated, erasing the message before sending. What would he say? Jake's thoughts drifted back to the board meeting looming in his future. He needed to step up, to cultivate a belief that connection and profit could coexist. He decided, for now, to focus on that purpose. His phone buzzed again, a reminder for the meeting. Jake set the phone down and returned to his notes, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Vision and passion were inextricably linked. He would need to portray Maria's narrative with the fervor it deserved. But how? How do you convey the power of art alongside metrics expected by the board? He felt the delicate balance between vulnerability and professionalism weigh heavily on his heart. With renewed determination, he sketched out a framework. Perhaps starting with personal anecdotes could disarm the room. Contrast the sterile setting of their meetings with Maria's warmth, her struggles and triumphs through art. But he knew well the skeptical voices that resided in the boardroom, where ambition often overshadowed humanity. Their stony faces flared to life in his mind's eye, the eye rollers, the smirkers, the unyielding proponents of the bottom line. He could hear their doubts and fears as clearly as his own heart thrumming in his chest. Would sharing Maria's story be seen as a soft stance? The visceral urge to turn inward, to protect himself, reared its head. Who would support his vision when the room was stacked in favor of self-preservation? It would take courage, but how would he find it? As the moon dipped low outside, casting a pale glow through the diner's windows, Jake set his notebook aside and took a sip from his coffee, feeling its warmth seep into his hands. It hit him then, perhaps he didn't just need to share Maria's story, he needed to share his own. A narrative of fear, driven by a relentless need to find significance in a world obsessed with numbers. A tale of a father, confronting the corporate machine not only for himself but for his daughter, for the promise of a better tomorrow. He could draw parallels that would resonate. Just as resolution settled within him, his phone buzzed again, jolting him back. He glanced down at the screen, a response from Sarah. "This isn't just about us, Jake. It's about what you need to face." His pulse quickened. What had she seen from the outside, that he couldn't see in himself? Facing his fear could lead him toward the authenticity he was desperately searching for, yet it could also plunge him deeper into uncertainty. Would he heed her advice or dismiss it as just a voice from the past? He inhaled deeply, the realization dawning upon him that both Maria's journey and his reunion with Sarah were pushing him toward an intersection of identity, a crucible of self-discovery that lay ahead. As the time ticked down to the board meeting, Jake found himself at a critical juncture. Embrace the challenge, or let fear dictate his path. The moment had arrived to confront not just the corporate scrutiny but his own tightly held truths. Would his impending decisions bring clarity, or would they unravel him entirely? This uncertainty started to become a potent motivator. The stakes had never been higher, and he was far from certain about which direction would lead to salvation or destruction. It was time to respond, not just to Sarah but to himself. Would he pursue the path to authenticity or retreat into the shadows of conformity one last time? The clock continued to tick, and with it sent a murmur of hope and dread rippling through him. Jake's fingers hovered over the screen, a brief battle raged within him. Sarah's words, heavy with implication, resonated far beyond their shared history. There was a depth to her message that reached places he thought long forsaken. He knew he had to respond, but how? A cool rush of air swept into the diner as the door swung open, a welcome distraction. Determination gripped him as he typed a simple reply, "When and where?" The rapid response was unexpected. "Tomorrow at noon. Same place." There was an urgency to her tone that sent a jolt through him. Part of him wanted to retreat, to hide behind the polished facade he'd worked so hard to maintain. Yet, the other part rebelled, yearning for the authenticity she promised. Clarity was not something to be feared, it was a powerful ally. He closed his eyes, envisioning the board meeting just a day away. The room would be packed, filled with judgment and expectations. But this time, he vowed to approach it with a fresh perspective, one that integrated not just metrics but personal connection. He wanted to give voice to the stories behind the data, to stir something greater than the bottom line. Jake flipped through his notebook, doodling Maria's name in bold letters at the top of the page, determined to weave her journey into his narrative. He began to scribble notes, catching fleeting thoughts of her struggles and triumphs. The more he wrote, the more he felt her spirit fueling his courage. Envisioning the board's reaction to his proposed blend of personal storytelling and corporate strategy invigorated him. Could vulnerability truly resonate? He remembered the previous crunch of numbers presenting only one side of the narrative while ignoring the strength of facing vulnerability head-on. He had seen how Maria's art could transform pain into relatability. Could he do the same? His resolve deepened, embracing the notion that his vulnerability might connect with others in the room who had their own stories to tell, hidden beneath professional facades. These thoughts rolled through his mind like a growing wave, the undeniable belief that embracing the personal could unlock new avenues for understanding within his company. Yet, with every positive thought came a swell of doubt. He envisioned the cold glances of some board members, quick to dismiss anything they deemed weakness. Would they even be able to appreciate the story behind the art? Their desires for success and profit might override any resonance he hoped to find through Maria's narrative. The unease danced through him, twisting in his gut. Would his willingness to be open put his career at risk? As the clock ticked closer to the meeting, he wrestled with a growing clarity. Confronting Sarah tomorrow meant confronting himself. What more had he buried? What other fears waited in the depths? With each passing hour, Jake's apprehension morphed into anticipation, compelling him to reflect on moments he had dismissed, the dreams he abandoned for security. Did he fear more for himself or for his daughter's perception of who he was? The night deepened, and with a wavering hand, he began to type again. "Sarah, you're right. I do have things to face. Let us make sure tomorrow isn't just another conversation." There was no turning back now, he needed honesty as his guiding light. He pressed send, heart racing. Would she challenge him, help him dig deeper? The prospect both terrified and thrilled him. As he prepared for bed, sleep eluded him, his mind spinning with possibilities. What revelations lay ahead at noon? What identities would he unearth in his conversation with Sarah, and how would they inform not just his tomorrow, but the fate of his board presentation? Boundless questions spiraled in his mind, a complicated tapestry begging to be unraveled. The moment was almost upon him. Jake felt the weight of anticipation pressing against his chest. Tomorrow, everything could shift. Would he emerge victorious, a transformed man, or would he be forced to recoil into the shadows he fought so hard to escape? As the lights dimmed, and silence enveloped him, one question reverberated: when the truth arrived, would he be ready to embrace it? Jake awoke to the sound of his daughter's laughter floating down the hallway. The soft morning light pooled into his bedroom, casting warm hues that could not quite dispel the lingering shadows of uncertainty. Today was the day, and yet his heart raced not with excitement but with trepidation. He dressed in a crisp shirt and a tailored blazer, the fabric a stark contrast to the tumult within him. As he stood before the mirror, he felt the weight of dual identities pressing down. The polished CEO who commanded respect, and the man who needed to reconnect with the parts of himself he lost through ambition and fear. He had always been a perfectionist, but the fragile balance between professionalism and vulnerability now seemed pivotal. Driving to the diner, he rehearsed key points in his head, mentally preparing himself for both his meeting with Sarah and the board presentation to follow. What could he say to evoke the connection he so desperately needed to forge? Each stoplight felt like an eternity, giving his thoughts the space to twist and knot. He nearly missed the final turn, a testament to the gravity of his internal dialogue. The diner came into view, an unpretentious establishment that held so many layers of his life within its walls. As he stepped inside, he noticed the familiar smells of coffee and pancakes, but they felt different today, heavy with significance. He spotted Sarah seated at a booth, a faint smile curling her lips as she noticed him. "Hey, Jake," she greeted, her tone warm yet laced with something deeper, an understanding that transcended the small talk they often settled for. "Hi, Sarah," he replied, settling into the seat across from her. A moment of uncertainty hovered in the air, and for a heartbeat, he wondered if unveiling the truth would shatter their fragile connection. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I need to face what I've kept hidden for too long," he admitted, surprising himself. The honest words rolled off his tongue with unexpected ease. As their conversation deepened, Sarah began to peel back familiar layers, sharing fragments of her own journey, dreams deferred, shadows of unfulfilled potential. Jake listened, captivated by her courage. A spark ignited within him, illuminating the courage he had neglected. "If you could do anything without fear, what would it be?" Sarah prompted, leaning forward. Jake considered the question seriously. The answer came easily: "I would share my daughter's journey. I would show how her art illustrates a side of life's struggles, dreams, moments people often overlook." "It's powerful." Their eyes locked, and he could see recognition in her gaze. "So why hold back at work?" Her question pierced through him, forcing introspection. The realization crashed over him. Why was his professional life so vastly detached from the heartbeat of his personal experiences? Was the value of connection less important than the fear of vulnerability? His entire career had revolved around the numbers, yet the emotional narrative remained untold. They shared stories and insights, weaving together a tapestry of mutual understanding. With each exchanged word, his fears took a backseat to the raw energy of the dialogue. The idea of infusing vulnerability into his presentation began to solidify. It was more than a strategy, it was a necessity. Yet as the sunlight faded and the diner grew steadier in its rhythm, doubt crept in. The looming board meeting hung like a dark cloud over his newfound clarity. Would he truly be able to carry this authenticity into that room? Just then, Sarah leaned back, the corners of her mouth curving upward. "Jake, I believe you can bridge the gap. Just show them the real you." Her faith hit him hard. It resonated with the potential he had buried under many layers of doubt. The meeting would indeed be a critical moment, a revelation of sorts. As they exchanged final thoughts, Jake felt a surge of determination blossom within. The truth of his daughter's art became not just a story to share, but a legacy to leave behind. The path was fraught with risks, but so was the journey of authenticity. The truth had begun to unravel, yet with it came the realization that the hardest part was still ahead. Would he have the courage to stand up in that boardroom, to confront those critical faces with the unvarnished truth? When the moment arrived to walk into that meeting, how much of himself would he truly reveal? As he prepared to part ways with Sarah, one question lingered: was he prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the facade he had been hiding behind? As Jake stepped out of the diner and into the crisp air, the weight of the impending board meeting loomed larger than ever. Each step toward his car felt like a journey through a fog of uncertainty, and doubt gnawed at his confidence. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, wrestling with the emotions that surged within him. The thought of speaking candidly in that sterile, corporate environment frightened him, yet it also lit a flame of anticipation. He drove in silence, his mind racing with thoughts of how to translate the connection he had forged with Sarah into his professional setting. The realization that sharing his daughter's journey could breathe life into his presentation morphed into a nagging voice. Would it resonate, or would it seal his fate in the boardroom as a sentimental fool? What if he showed them too much? Arriving at the office, Jake parked his car and took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill his lungs. The facade of confidence had always felt comfortable, but today, he was determined to peel back the layers. It was time to confront the polished persona he had created, a mask that shielded him from raw emotion but also isolated him from the people around him. Walking through the corridors, he passed colleagues lost in their own worlds. The laughter and chatter filled him with a sense of alienation. He felt like a ghost in a bustling gallery, half hidden among the frames. The nervous energy among his peers was palpable, a chaotic hum that contrasted sharply with the calm he had cultivated that morning. When he reached the conference room, he was confronted by the board members' serious, shrewd faces waiting expectantly. As he sat down, he felt the weight of their scrutiny pressing down. The room buzzed with anticipation, yet he was distracted by his own inner dialogue. How could he channel the warmth he had experienced with Sarah and transpose it onto these critical eyes? The PowerPoint slides he had prepared loomed on the screen, filled with graphs and projections. A part of him, his practiced, professional side, urged him to stick to the script, to deliver the figures and metrics that had always won the board's nods. But the realization of what Sarah had suggested loomed larger. It was time to reveal the heart behind the numbers. As he began, the initial notes felt stilted and rehearsed. He navigated through the slides, delivering statistics on the company's latest developments, but the room felt cold, sterile, devoid of the life he wished to infuse into his presentation. Then it happened. A flicker of bravery surged within him, brought forth by Sarah's encouragement. He paused mid-sentence, allowing the silence to settle around him. "I want to share something personal today," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. The board members exchanged glances, surprised. Jake delved into his daughter's art, how it captured authentic moments, how it conveyed struggles and aspirations in a way that resonated on a level charts never could. He detailed how observing her journey had taught him about vulnerability, connection, and the importance of human stories behind every strategy. To his astonishment, as he spoke, the atmosphere shifted. Faces softened, the tension in the room dissipated. It was as if the barriers he had imagined crumbled with each word. He could see flickers of understanding, some were even nodding, engaging with the narrative as they recognized the deep connections between life, art, and business. Yet just as he felt momentum building, a flicker of resistance shot through him. What if they believed he was losing the plot? What if they dismissed his heartfelt plea in favor of cold data? He challenged himself to stay the course. The authenticity he had discovered alongside Sarah had infused him with a strange mix of excitement and vulnerability, and he knew he had to see this through. As he concluded, he caught glimpses of their expressions, now mixed with curiosity and contemplation. Connections were forming, and Jake sensed something transformative had happened, not just within him, but in the room. But he was left with lingering anxiety. Was he truly ready for whatever outcome awaited him? Jake silenced the encroaching doubts that sought to drown him in self-criticism. Standing at the pulpit of exposure, he realized the most significant revelation was ahead. Would this newfound honesty pave the way for acceptance, or would it lay him bare, unprotected before the very people who had always measured him by his performance? The air thick with anticipation, Jake held his breath, wondering if his leap into vulnerability would ultimately lead to connection or isolation. The moment of truth was upon him, and he resolved to embrace it. As the final words slipped from Jake's lips, he felt an unexpected wave of relief wash over him. The silence enveloped him, thick with uncertainty, but there was a tender murmur of understanding among the board members that hinted at a deeper engagement than he had anticipated. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't a weakness after all. Jake's heart raced as he surveyed the faces before him, searching frantically for cues. He could see raised eyebrows, a few nodding heads, but mostly, there was contemplation. He had taken a risk, one that essentially flipped his professional persona on its head. What would it mean if they embraced this new side of him, even if just for a moment? "Thank you for sharing, Jake," piped up Elaine, a senior board member known for her no-nonsense approach. Her warm tone contrasted harshly with her reputation, and Jake felt himself leaning forward, eager for her response. "It's refreshing to hear how personal experiences can inform our strategies. We often get caught up in numbers and forget the stories behind them." A spark ignited inside him, fueled by her words. Perhaps he wasn't just exposing his vulnerabilities, but also inviting them to step back and reflect on what they valued as a team. All those years of playing it safe, boxing himself into a corner defined by metrics alone, what had it really gotten him? Stiff postures and unimpressed nods. "Thank you, Elaine," he replied, feeling more grounded now, a sense of belonging towards his peers blossoming. In a world filled with data, it's easy to forget that it's the human connection that drives us forward both in business and in life. A moment later, he noticed Graham, the operations director, scribbling something. "Jake," Graham said, his tone more earnest than Jake had ever heard from him, "can you elaborate on how your daughter's artistic approach could inform our client relations?" The room hushed again as Jake shifted gears, feeling the shift in focus onto actionable ideas instead of abstract sentiment. For the next several minutes, Jake found himself tethered to a collective energy. He encouraged them to consider how creativity could influence their outreach strategies, proposing workshops inspired by Sarah's art journey. With each suggestion, Jake rediscovered his own enthusiasm, especially when he saw the flickers of interest spark in the eyes around the table. Suddenly, he realized this wasn't merely about sharing a personal story, this was about forging connections, not just with the board, but also with his own identity as a father and a leader. Each word cascaded into a hopeful vision that he hadn't dared to dream of, a culture driven by compassion, curiosity, and creativity. But as the meeting drew to a close, Jake felt the familiar tendrils of doubt winding through him. What if this temporary connection evaporated once the meeting adjourned? The click of screens closing, the rustle of papers meant a return to an environment far less forgiving than the shared warmth of that moment. He glanced at the board members as they began discussing next steps, his chest tightening. Would he be able to maintain this newfound authenticity? Could he shift the narrative in a way that permanently reshaped how his colleagues viewed him? The supportive atmosphere felt fleeting, and Jake feared falling back into his old patterns. As he walked away from the conference room, Jake felt lighter yet burdened by the question that loomed larger than before. How could he remain true to this authentic self he had discovered amid the pressure to conform? With each step, he resolved to take ownership of his role, but uncertainty plagued him. Was he ready to challenge the established norms? Just as he contemplated this new venture, the sound of approaching footsteps made him turn. It was Sarah, her bright smile lighting up the dim corridor. "You were amazing in there, Dad," she said, her eyes twinkling with pride. His heart swelled at her recognition, yet doubt nibbled at the edges of his satisfaction. Would the authentic connection endure beyond these walls, in the realm of expectations and corporate personas? He needed to confront this question before settling back into that role he had inhabited for so long. He watched his daughter's smile fade for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Do you think they believed in what I shared today?" Jake asked, feeling exposed again, a counterbalance to the confidence he had gained. Sarah studied him for a moment, assessing the vulnerability beneath her father's polished mask. "I think they saw you, really saw you. You just have to be ready to keep being that person." Jake nodded, knowing that the challenge ahead was twofold. It wasn't just about showing up in meetings, it was about showing up in life fully and authentically. But as he walked away, that flicker of dread returned. Would he falter when it mattered most? The path forward grew complicated, with decisions that could redefine his personal and professional identity. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontations ahead, feeling the weight of possibility and the fear of failure intertwine. The time had come to face not just the board, but his own inner struggles. Real growth lay just beyond the next door he had to walk through. Jake paced through the dimly lit hallway, the echoes of the boardroom conversation trailing behind him like the resonance of a freshly struck chord. Encouraged yet restless, he knew the real test was just beginning. The encounter with his daughter had reignited a spark, but it was fragile, and the looming expectations of the corporate world threatened to snuff it out. He glanced at his reflection in the glass wall, a blurred image of the man he had presented all these years, encased in the suit that had come to reflect more than just professionalism. It symbolized a facade. Behind him, the board members were packing up, their discussions melting into background noise. He felt a churning mix of relief and apprehension. Sure, they had appreciated his vulnerability, but did that truly translate to a lasting shift in how he would be perceived moving forward? Pulling on a deep breath, he decided not to return to his office just yet. Jake found himself in the small cafe at the end of the building, a refuge he often overlooked in the rush of deadlines. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, yet it was more than the aroma he relished. It was the simplicity of the moment, a stark contrast to the complex world beyond. "Hey, Jake. You want your usual?" asked Jenny, the waitress, her voice cutting through his thoughts. She had a knack for remembering names and orders, an enviable quality he often wished he possessed. "Yeah, that sounds good," he said, appreciating the warmth and normalcy she offered. As she prepared his drink, he observed the rhythmic way she moved, an effortless elegance in the chaos of her responsibilities. Beyond her role at the cafe, he sensed a kindred spirit, someone who engaged purely with the world around her. When she returned, steaming cup in hand, he couldn't help but ask, "How do you manage to stay so upbeat amidst the chaos?" Jenny leaned against the counter, a knowing smile on her lips. "Life's too short to get bogged down, you know? It's all about finding joy in the little things, even in making coffee." She cocked her head, assessing him as if seeing deeper. "You've got to stop stressing about what everyone wants from you." Her words hung in the air, echoing the essence of his recent introspections. He was still grappling with the need to conform to his old identity while attempting to embrace this new, unapologetic side of himself. "How do you know so much about happiness?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I just learned to listen. Everyone's battling their own stuff, you know? I've had my share of ups and downs. It's about connecting instead of shielding," she replied, meeting his gaze with an earnestness that opened something within him. He found it surprising how her perspective resonated, seemingly simple yet profoundly transformative. In these moments, Jake examined his own approach to emotional vulnerability. Maybe it wasn't enough to just share, to disclose his experiences. It was critical that he truly connect with those around him, allowing space for ongoing dialogue and authenticity. As they spoke, he realized that he had been overly focused on conforming to the expectations of his colleagues, rather than fostering genuine relationships. A flicker of inspiration ignited. What if he applied these same principles of connectivity to his leadership style? He could create a culture built on shared experience, one that thrived on emotional engagement rather than mere metrics. But with this newfound insight came the unmistakable weight of responsibility. Could he be the leader who embraced such change? The thought of challenging established norms sent tremors through his core. What if his attempts fell flat? The risk loomed like a shadow, threatening to undo his progress before it began. "Hey, Earth," to Jake. Jenny nudged him back to the present. "Didn't he mean to lose you there? Just enjoy the coffee." Jake managed a smile, but beneath it, a storm of doubt swirled. He had stolen a moment of clarity, yet he knew that returning to the board would soon invigilate his resolve. To embrace authenticity in a space that prized conformity would take courage and tenacity. That flicker of excitement blended with anxiety as he pushed off from the counter. A plan began to form, to schedule regular open forums with the board. It would be an opportunity to address individual stories, a chance for creativity to spark within the structure. Yet the edges of doubt gnawed at him. How would this initiative be received? With renewed purpose, Jake glanced at Jenny, who was already serving another customer with an ease he envied. She had unknowingly inspired him to step outside his comfort zone, but as he left the cafe, the critical question loomed. Was he ready to take the plunge and risk everything for an authentic culture? The moment felt electric. He had the spark, but could he stoke the flames of transformation when it mattered most? He knew he would have to confront not just his fears of failure but the resistance he might face from those who preferred the status quo. A determined steadiness settled in his chest, bolstered by a newfound understanding of inner strength. He stepped into the world of corporate expectation again, preparing to challenge what lay ahead, but there was no guarantee that courage alone would be enough to keep the momentum alive. As he prepared for the inevitable confrontation with his colleagues, a stirring realization emerged. The real journey of authenticity was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. Could he reshape not only his role but perhaps even the organization? The path forward teetered between daunting and exhilarating. Just as he was about to approach the conference room, his phone buzzed a message that could alter everything. He took a deep breath. Ready or not, he had to face whatever was waiting on the other side. Jake stood at a crossroads, the buzz of the office feeling alive with energy yet heavy with expectation. After years trapped in the corporate grind, he had finally stripped away the constraints of his previous self, and with each step toward the conference room where his colleagues awaited, a sense of purpose swelled within him. He recalled that day in the diner with Maria, the unexpected bond they had forged over shared stories and vulnerabilities. That encounter had ignited a fire within him, a fire that had pushed him to embrace authenticity, even when it seemed perilous. Today, the stakes felt higher than ever. He was ready to walk into the lion's den, armed with his personal narrative. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door to the conference room. The contrasting ambience of polished tables and scrutinizing eyes met him. Yet, Jake could feel the weight of his experiences fortifying him. This wouldn't just be another presentation. He was about to forge a new path forward. Good morning, everyone, Jake began, his voice steady, encapsulating the room's attention. Today, I want to share something that connects not just our projections and figures, but the essence that underpins them, our humanity. Heads turned, eyebrows raised, a quiet murmur rippled through the board members. For a moment, he hesitated, questioning his choice to step into the unknown space of vulnerability. But then, he thought of Lily and the legacy he wanted to create for her. His heart propelled him onward. He spoke of Maria's struggles and dreams, of how art could bridge the gap between personal lives and the corporate world. He shared stories of his daughter's artwork, which revealed the raw and often overlooked moments in life, ones that resonated more profoundly than any financial report. He could sense Laura, a usually stony-faced board member, nodding in understanding as he bared his soul. With each passing moment, the atmosphere shifted. Jake's words began to weave a tapestry of connection among the group, a thread that spurred understanding and camaraderie. The boardroom, which had previously felt like a battleground, transformed into a space of shared humanity. He urged them to imagine an outreach program that empowered local artists like Maria, marrying profitability with purpose. The room hung on his every word. Jake articulated a vision that transcended traditional metrics. A culture steeped in empathy and creativity would not only enhance their brand but resonate deeply with their clients. It was time for transformation, not just for the company but for himself as well. Then, as he wrapped up, a familiar figure emerged from the back of the room. It was Elaine, her usually critical gaze softened. "You've inspired us today, Jake," she said, her voice warm yet firm. "We must not just seek profits but ensure that our values shine through in every project we take on." With that endorsement, the tension that had clung to the air dissipated. The board began to discuss Jake's ideas with enthusiasm that astonished him, suggesting initiatives that integrated artistic endeavors into their marketing strategies, exploring collaborations with local communities. For the first time, they were actively engaging in a dialogue about connection rather than mere numbers. Jake felt an exhilarating surge as hope fluttered in the pit of his stomach. This was not just professional recognition, it was a profound moment of personal achievement. He had conquered his fears, bridged the gap between his roles as a CEO and a father, and proven that vulnerability could foster genuine connections. The meeting ended with applause, a powerful affirmation of transformation. As he stepped away from the conference table, the gravity of the moment washed over him. He had not only taken a leap for himself, he had established his presence as a leader who valued connection over conformity. The synergy within the room buoyed his spirit. He felt solid confidence in his choices and recognized that he had finally stepped into an established position. The journey from corporate puppet to compassionate leader was marked by this singular moment. He was no longer merely navigating the pressures of the corporate machine, he was a catalyst for change. As Jake exited the conference room, his heart swelled with pride. He realized this was far more than professional validation. It was a personal evolution that encapsulated all he had worked toward both in the boardroom and at home with Lily. He picked up his phone, his fingers dancing over the screen as he sent her a text. "I've got great news, sweetheart. You'll never guess what happened today." With a smile, he pressed send, knowing he could share a new narrative with her, a testament to what it means to embrace both ambition and compassion. That evening, they sat together, surrounded by sketches of her latest artwork. He shared the day's triumphs and revelations. As he watched her eyes light up, Jake felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He achieved more than he ever thought possible. Now, as he reflected on the journey, he understood that true success was defined not just by accolades and bottom lines, but by the connections made along the way. And in that realization, he found rest and strength for the challenges ahead. He had not only transformed himself, but he inspired those around him to do the same. This was only the beginning, yet Jake felt a confident ease enveloping him. He was ready to face anything that awaited in both the corporate realm and the personal bonds he treasured most. This was the moment where his story, once a tale of ambition and anxiety, transformed into one of purpose and connection. Now, more than ever, he was resolute. He would model for Lily the kind of life that honored authenticity, not just ambition, illustrating the profound truth that personal achievement is intricately woven into the fabric of our connections with others. And in that moment, Jake knew that the real journey of transformation was only just beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share, because only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.